Snow Woman. Zenzo Kasai. So, has anyone ever really seen a snowman? No, no one. No, no one. But my father and I did see it on our way back from the mountains in Matsubara across the bridge. If that's so, my grandfather saw him many times. No, my grandmother and I were going back from a delivery there the other night, and in front of a house somewhere, we heard Snow-Omon holding a baby in his arms and saying something very thin and thin. I'm not lying at all. We boys are convinced of this. Snow falls from the heavens on nights of heavy snowstorms. The Snow Woman of unworldly beauty, looking pure white, is standing in the snowstorm with a nursing baby in her arms. And then, please, please, she said. She was standing in the middle of a snowstorm, holding a baby girl in her arms. Please, hold this child for a moment, it said. But you must not hold her. If you hold her, your life will end on the spot. And I have been married once in the 19th year of my life. My wife was just a girl of 16. However, our hometown was an early marriage area, so it was not so strange for a couple of 19 and 16 years old to get married. The wedding was held at the beginning of February on a day when there was a heavy snowstorm. The snowstorm continued for a few days and traffic was disrupted, so the date was changed. We had already met, but it was as if I had met her for the first time that night. I thought she was beautiful. She also had a certain fragility about her, and I thought she was very sweet. I truly loved her from the bottom of my heart. I still feel the same way today. She was very weak. She had a beautiful, fresh, translucent white face with slender, stroked shoulders. I was concerned that evening, for although she was so beautiful, I had a feeling that she might be suffering from lung disease. I thought of the beauty of Yuki-onna. I also thought of how honest, quiet, and kind she was. We had a happy day. The days were happy and the nights were happy. Then spring arrived. Summer arrived. I have never called her by name. She was always referred to as my wife. And when the time came for me to call her by her name, Tomiko, that summer was the end of our life together forever. Why? Because I had run away from home. In the middle of August, the middle of the 7th month of that year, I left my girlfriend, abandoned home, and telegraphed my resignation. I live for your sake, she always said. She always said this. Why? Why would she say such a thing? At that time, my wife was 4 months pregnant. We lived separately from the rest of the family in a large apple and grape orchard that continued the house. I was living without a job. She, too, had no household chores to do except to go back and forth between the main house and the remote house, and they were always together. Whenever I was bored, I read books. I live for you, she said. She often cried when she said this. What for? Why should she say such a thing? I didn't understand. The fruit of a righteous person is a tree of life. I slipped away from my wife's side and rubbed a teasing kiss on her tear-stained cheek, which was still breathing infantile sleep, and went outside in the late August night. I looked up at the starry sky and counted the stardust twinkling reservedly in the deep darkness, praying for the little ones who would be born into this new and troubled world with us. And my heart was weak and deeply troubled, and I would always throw myself down on the ground, still and wet with dew, until my wife came up to me. Please get yourself in a better mood, he said. I am in a bad mood. No, 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 no. No, it is not. We cried. We cried and hugged each other for a long time. And when we were done crying, we would drink each other's cold water from the nearby well. Then we went back to our bedrooms. Before spring, many small birds visited our garden. But in the summer, only one bird, a beautiful little bird with red breast hair, always perched on an apple tree near the same window, and chirped. It would seem to come and go in the morning and at dusk, and then it would chirp a lonely song for a moment before flying away without a trace. I had seen the little bird that morning as well. I went to the bank in town and never went home. I crossed the sea to an island. 7 years had passed since then. I wandered from one end of the cold, snowy northern island country to the other, doing all sorts of labor and peddling. I was already accustomed to wandering. I had no thoughts of home or my girlfriend. I had an indescribable thought in my heart that kept me going and going and going. It was January of the 7th year. I was staying in a cheap hotel in the capital on this island. I had no money saved up to wait for a warm spring. It was also too late to travel from this island to the distant islands further north. I had just returned to the capital when I was so overcome by the icy, searing waters of the river that I couldn't stand the thought of going. But just as I was about to return to the capital, I was discovered by the master of the mountain at a cheap inn. The mountain was a railroad sleeper logging mountain. After changing trains several times, the train stopped at a town at the end of another mountain where coal was produced. From there, the train went another 6 miles to the end of the mountain. There stood 3 large thatched houses side by side. Inside the huts were earthen floors, 1 meter wide, running along the sides of the buildings, creating several hearths. Between the woven boards on the 2 sides were dozens of props, which were rolled into millstones behind them during the day. At night, they would lay out their pillows on the floor between the 2 sides of the earthen floor while a large tree stump was burning. "I'll be patient until the end of March," he said. "I'm not going to sell my wares on this mountain alone. By the end of March, I'll be able to leave for the capital. Then you can buy a farm near there and live a quiet life. Until then, you'll have to be patient." The tall, stout, red-blanketed man with a thick nose and black beard stopped me as I left the cashier, but my heart did not listen to him. I felt a kind of yearning for home. I felt tenderly for my abandoned wife. I was tenderly tender toward my child, whom I had not yet seen. And although I never heard from her again, I could not help but think that she was still living alone, protecting and nurturing our child. From the valley floor of the cold, white, deathly mountains, I looked up at the icy moon in the late afternoon and said to myself, "Yes, it's time to go home, it's time to go home." "Well, then," he said to himself, "then, did you really see the snow woman?" "No, I did not." "Then did you not see it?" "Yes, I did. The snowflakes fell from the heavens on the night of the great blizzard. And then, I am begging you, please, please hold her for a moment." And so said Yuki-onna. After saying goodbye to my master, I crossed the 6-mile road to the town of Tonzan at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A heavy snowstorm hit me on the way, and by the time I came to a mountain pass 2 miles before the town, it was already past 10 o'clock. The snow filled his crotch. The snow raged in rage at the darkness, roaring and going mad, and laughed again. "Please, I beg of you," she please hold this little girl for a moment." The snow woman, who looked so beautiful and pure white at that moment, clung to me with a thin voice. I moved through the snowstorm. But finally, Yuki-onna's wish was not granted. Another 7 years have passed since then. I have no home to go back to, no wife, no children. So I have to wander around this cold and snowy northern island country from one end to the other without any hope of ever returning. January 1914.